Are you serious, Mom? You can't be doing this now. You think I don't know what you really mean, Daniel. This isn't about timing. It's about respect. Respect? You walked away from the business last year. You retired. We've kept the company afloat. You've kept it afloat with my name on the letterhead and your bank account open. Watch your tone. Or what? You'll tell me I loved your father less because I disagreed with your spending? I heard my voice catch and I hated it. I kept my hands folded in my lap because my fingers always betrayed me when I was nervous. They fiddled with rings, with napkin folds, with tiny things that mattered only to me. Amelia smoothed her scarf like an audience waiting for a show to start. Sophie sat quiet at the end of the table, eyes on her plate, and I could see the old hesitation there like a fault line. You've changed, Mom, Amelia said softly, like an accusation disguised as concern. You're different. No, I said. You are. Daniel slammed his fork down. This is ridiculous. We've planned for this. We talked. You talked, I cut in. You talked about growth while you hollowed out the company. You made decisions I wouldn't sign for. You treated people who worked for us like numbers. You treated me like a bank. That's not fair, he said, suddenly small. I've worked my whole life for this. So did your father, I said. And I kept the books when you were off at client dinners. There was a long breath. Someone cleared their throat. Sophie looked up finally, and for a second I saw the child she used to be. The one who'd lean on my knee and ask questions about stamps and paper. Maybe we should take a step back, Sophie whispered. It's getting ugly. Or maybe we should be honest, said Amelia. Mom, you've got assets. Retirement is fine, but we want guarantees, Daniel finished. We want assurances that the foundation we built won't crumble. You want guarantees, I repeated, and the word felt like a stone. All right, I will give you guarantees. I will sign documents tomorrow, but I need a break. I'm tired. Mr. Reed cleared his throat from the corner of the room. He had watched this family theater for years, loyal, neat, and used to stepping in where I did not want to step. Evelyn, he said, perhaps a temporary arrangement would help. A delegation of daily duties. You can still retain final authority. I looked at him, at the clean gray of his suit. He'd been my counsel since the early days when my husband was too busy teaching and I was too young to understand all the ledgers. Do that, I said quietly. Prepare the papers. I want the operational control transferred to you for the next 6 months. No signatures from them without my consent. He nodded and reached for the tablet on the side table. I'll prepare a formal proxy. You'll still be the owner, Evelyn. This is only administrative. Only administrative, I repeated. My voice was steadier than I felt. That suits me. Are you sure this is what you want? Sophie asked, voice shaking. I mean, leaving? For how long? For a while. I smiled at her the way I used to smile when she was small and scraped her knee and wanted it to mean nothing. I need to think, to travel, to get some treatment. The dinner ended like that. Polished, polite, brittle. Mr. Reed and I spoke in the hall while my children gathered coats and polite apologies. You understand? He asked as we reached the car. You want the appearance of absence? Yes. I looked at the tail lights as they disappeared down the drive. I want to know who they are when I'm nothing to them. On the train, I watched the city unravel into countryside. The carriage was quiet. Everyone had places to be. I imagined their dinner conversation continuing without me. The quick calculations, the permissions, the small satisfactions of being right. I called a number only Mr. Reed knew and left a short message. Prepare the documents, action the proxy, maintain discretion. No one must suspect. He called me that night and his voice was soft on the line. You really intend to go through with this? He asked. Yes, I said. And I want you to handle everything at the office. No leaks, no hints. You realize the risks, he warned. I do, I said. But I'd rather feel pain once with my eyes open than a slow ache wearing me blind. The apartment I rented was modest, far from the marble halls and the chandeliers I'd once walked beneath. The kettle had a small chip. The curtains were plain. I placed my few suitcases on the bed and looked at them the way you look at a patient you hope to heal. There was a nightstand lamp and a mirror that showed me a woman with shorter hair and eyes that had learned to stop asking. I sat at the small table and wrote 3 lines in an old notebook. Clara Hart, new life. Work, household. Disguise, modest clothes, cap, Low voice, observe, learn. I rehearsed in the mirror like an actress, feeling foolish and oddly liberated. You can do this, I told myself. You can watch without interfering. A knock on the door startled me. I opened it to the sound of the next-door neighbor, a woman who offered a pot of stew and a smile. First night? She asked. Yes, first night, I said. She pressed the casserole into my hands and left with a warmth I hadn't expected. The smell of simmered tomatoes filled the room, and for a moment I felt human in a way that had nothing to do with money. That night, I lay awake cataloging images. Daniel at the conference table counting numbers, Amelia rehearsing a speech in silk, Sophie at her piano, fingers lingering on a chord. I thought of the ledger under the library floorboards, of late-night phone calls, of certain smiles that had always been bargaining. In the morning, I folded the clothes I'd brought into a small bag. I wore a plain coat, a scarf wrapped low, and my grandmother's old brooch hidden under the collar. I looked at my reflection and practiced the soft, small voice I would use. Clara, I murmured to myself, you'll be quieter, kinder, and watchful. You'll be invisible until you decide not to be. I locked the apartment door behind me, and for the first time in years, I walked away from the name everyone knew. My keys clicked against the metal. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish. I breathed in and out steady. I wanted to know who my children really were, even if it broke my heart. The front gate clicked open like a small verdict. Are you sure you belong here? I heard before I saw the man in the foyer, my son's voice sharper than I remembered. No, I'm here to clean, I answered, and kept my voice small. First day. You're early. We prefer discreet people. I can be discreet. Good, we don't need gossip. Of course. They were briefer, colder, more practiced than the mornings I used to know. Daniel stood with a folder under his arm, the sort of folder that smells faintly of offices and late meetings. He looked me over fast, coat, plain shoes, the scarf tied too tightly, and already made his decision. You'll start with the east wing. Marble silver. Don't scratch anything. No scratches. And the pantry, inventory. Yes, sir. Amelia drifted in on a cloud of perfume and impatience, glancing at my hands as if they might be stained by my station. Do you have experience? She asked like it was a test. I worked in households before. We need someone who moves quietly. We can't have surprises. I understand. I'll be careful. Sophie was the last to enter, carrying a stack of papers and wearing an expression that still looked like a poem I couldn't place. Morning, she said softly, not meeting my eyes. We're short-staffed today. I can help, I said, and meant it with a weight I hadn't expected. They didn't ask for references. They didn't look closely. They'd learned to see what suited them. You'll clock your hours with the office, Daniel said, already turning away. There's a uniform in the staff room. I felt the uniform's weight like a costume I'd been waiting to put on. In the locker, the fabric smelled of starch and polish, lives rented in tidy folds. I changed in a small room I'd once had renovated for guests. Now the mirror reflected a woman who could be pushed aside and asked nothing in return. I pinned my hair under a cap, practiced a softer cadence, and told myself this was necessary. Why did you take the job here? The driver turned butler, an embarrassed man whose name I'd never known, asked quietly as I bent to lift a heavy silver tray. Needed work, I said, and the lie traveled smoothly from my mouth. No one saw the tremor. You'll be working directly under Mrs. Carter today, Daniel called from the doorway. She'll show you the ropes. Mrs. Carter guided me through corridors I had once argued over, paint choices, cushions, the exact angle of a lamp. My hands remembered those choices before my brain did. They moved with the muscle memory of ownership, a feather duster that remembered the grain of mahogany, a Polish cloth that fit my palm like an old friend. I moved past portraits of my husband and my early self, and the ache bit sharp. Mind the portrait frames, Mrs. Carter said. Do not touch the gilding. I won't, I said, and my throat closed when I saw my own handwriting on a ledger left open on the library table. My careful loops and notes, a ghost of orders once given. You're slow, Daniel snapped as he passed back through, arms folded. We can't have inefficiency. I'm thorough, I said, and kept my hands busy. It takes time to do it right. Right, he said, and left the word like a thrown glove. Amelia stood by the conservatory window, sipping something chilled and watching me like a critic at a rehearsal. "You move like someone who enjoys being looked at," she said. "You should learn to be invisible." "I prefer being useful," I replied, folding napkins the way I used to teach interns, neat corners, exact spacing. The memory of those lessons was a small bitter sweetness. Sophie lingered by the piano, fingers resting on ivory. "You used to be here every morning," she said suddenly, voice soft as a revealed bruise. "You used to hum when you cleaned." "I hummed because I knew I belonged," I said. "Now I hum to remember." She looked away, and for a second the surface of her face cracked. "I miss you," she said, almost to herself. That line landed in the hollows of me. I kept working. Tears would be a hazard in a uniform. Tears would draw attention, and attention would ruin the experiment. "Did you always like this job?" Amelia asked later, leaning over a tray of crystal. "It's ordinary." "Yes," I said without thinking. "There is dignity in small things." "Is that what they tell you in domestic school?" She scoffed. "There's dignity, and then there's being paid enough to care." Her contempt stung, but the sting was clearer than surprise. I'd expected their cruelty, but not how easily they would turn it into performance in front of staff. Their carelessness wore a practiced polish. "Do you have a family?" The head house manager asked gently as he handed me a linen. I hesitated. The truth was a jagged thing. "None that matters here," I said. When the midday phone call came from Mr. Reed, short, formal, a voice that had steadied my hand through resignations and signatures, I ducked into the pantry and answered with my new voice. "How goes cleaning?" he asked. "Quiet so far," I said. "Good. Keep notes, Clara. I'll handle any questions." "Thank you." I didn't tell him about the ledger I'd seen, or the way Daniel's anger folded into the corners of the house. I didn't tell him about Amelia's laughter or Sophie's small murmur. I only told him what I'd rehearsed. I was alone, I was watching. At noon, I found myself standing in the great dining room, the very table that had held so many family dinners, contracts signed with shaking hands, promises etched into china. I polished a candlestick, and my reflection in the window stared back. The woman who'd bought that candlestick for warmth, now reflected as a stranger. "Who cleans like you?" Amelia asked suddenly, watching my methodical strokes. "You treat silver like it's sacred." "My mother taught me," I lied smoothly. The truth, the hands that had taught me were my own, stayed folded inside. Sophie came up behind me, and this time she didn't look away. "Why did you leave?" she asked, a simple question that felt like a verdict. "I needed to rest," I said. "To travel." "For treatment?" she pressed. "They said you'd gone for treatment." "Yes," I answered. "They said that." Her brow pinched. "You could have told me," she said. "I would have come." "You had your life," I said. "And you have your work." The answer landed bluntly, and for a moment I feared I'd spoken too harshly. But her eyes filled, not with accusation, but with something raw and complicated. All afternoon I catalogued little betrayals, unpaid invoices folded into magazines, staff rotating like worn gears. A charity gala planning list with a line item that read "New Linens" beside one that read "Quiet Rumors." The house was still beautiful. It had become a place for transactions more than tenderness. As dusk fell, Daniel called from the study. "We're having guests next week. Make sure everything is perfect." "We will. And make a note. Discuss the Johnson acquisition tomorrow with my office." "Noted," I said. The word settled like a stone. I left the silver gleaming and the linens folded with particular care. In the small room that night I changed slowly, peeling off the uniform like a second skin. In the mirror, I saw the outline of the woman I'd chosen to be, soft-voiced, patient, invisible, and the woman I still was, who'd signed contracts and counted profit margins. They sat uneasily beside each other. Before I climbed into bed, I opened the notebook I'd started in the rented apartment and wrote with a steady hand, "Observed, contempt in Amelia, ambition in Daniel, confusion and regret in Sophie. Keep watch. Prepare." Outside, the mansion held its breath. Chandeliers glowed, curtains closed against the night, and the family I had built moved through rooms that no longer belonged solely to memory. They didn't know the maid scrubbing their marble floors. Was their own mother. You really think she'd notice if the linens were thinner? She wouldn't notice anything. She's not here to notice. Good. Then let's move the delivery to Friday. That gives us time. They were speaking casually in the sitting room, the same room where I had once hosted book clubs and fundraisers, and their laughter was easy, like the clink of crystal. I stood in the hallway with a dusting cloth balled in my hand and listened as if the air itself might tell me more than words. Did you see the new rug? It's perfect for the foyer. Expensive, of course. Don't be vulgar. It's investment grade. Everything here's an investment now. I pressed my palm to the banister. My fingers knew the wood like an old friend. But now it felt thin under my touch, varnish worn in places I had polished 1,000 times. I moved on, pretending to check the banister for dust, while they catalogued the house as if it were a portfolio, not a home. Clara, someone called gently. The china in the dining room, check for hairline cracks. On it. My voice was low, practiced. I gave them what they expected, quiet competence, no questions asked. Later in the kitchen, I watched them more closely. Daniel spoke in short bursts, numbers falling from his mouth like small stones, acquisition, margin, leverage. Amelia arranged words like jewelry, choosing the right syllables to give herself weight. Sophie hovered by the stove, folding napkins with delicate care, glancing up at times as if wanting to say something but stopping herself. You really trust Reed to keep things running? I heard Daniel ask, the edge in his voice sharper than I liked. He's practical, came Amelia's smooth reply. He'll do what's needed until we decide otherwise. We should be cautious, someone said. You know how investors react to instability. I wiped the rim of a teapot and wrote every phrase in the small notebook I kept hidden beneath a stack of clean towels. I recorded the cadence of their voices, the way contempt slipped on like a glove. My throat tightened when Amelia described a charity event as good PR, as if compassion were something you picked up for image. Do we really have to keep that portrait? Amelia asked one afternoon, tilting her head toward a painting of my late husband. It's so somber. Leave it, Daniel said quickly. It's part of the brand. Brand, Amelia repeated. That's the nice word for family heritage these days. Sophie passed by carrying a tray and gave me a look that cut across the chatter. Are you okay? She asked, softer than anyone had in weeks. You look tired. I'm fine, I lied, folding a napkin. The work keeps me busy. You don't have to hide behind busy, she said, and then she walked away before either of them could soften the moment into something ordinary. I reminded myself to breathe. The house smelled of lemon polish and warm bread, an ordinary pleasantness that made the sharp things sound stranger. At night, I wrote in my diary by the light of a small lamp in the staff room, each entry spooling like thread. Dates, remarks, small cruelties, and careless comforts. I kept the pages like evidence, and each line made my chest ache. Did you see the email about the art donation? Amelia asked one morning. We'll get exposure and a tax break. Who's handling the paperwork? Daniel replied. I don't want any holes. I'll sign, the voice went on, casual, like an agreement made over lunch. We'll root it through a shell. My pen paused. A shell. Thin paper hiding the weight of things. I kept writing, quiet as a witness. That afternoon, a server asked me, without looking up from polishing a tray, who runs the foundation now? We do, I heard someone reply. Management by the family. We should consider a third-party audit, the manager suggested, and the laughter that followed had the taste of a courtroom gavel. One morning I found a stack of invoices shoved behind a magazine on the coffee table. The numbers were small alone, but ugly in total. Payments rerouted, payments delayed. A name I recognized as a vendor for local charities had an account closed with a note. Defer until Q3. I slid the papers into my apron and kept dusting as if the paper weighed nothing at all. Have you spoken to Reed about this? I asked once when a quiet moment opened, surprising myself with the question. He's handling things, Daniel said without looking up. He knows what he's doing. And if he doesn't? I pressed, but the room closed like a book. Amelia's smile sharpened. Then we'll find someone who does. You don't get to question everything, she added, almost kindly, as if I weren't the one who had written the rules of prudence for decades. The irony made my chest ache, but I folded another napkin and smiled with my mouth only. Sophie lingered near the stairs, fingers tracing the rail. I saw Mary from the shelter today, she said. She mentioned a delivery that never came. We'll look into it, Daniel said. The answer was immediate and practiced. There was no apology in it, only a checkbox. That night, during a late tea with the staff manager, I let the diary breathe in my lap and asked the man a question I'd been holding. Do they ever talk about their mother here? About me? He looked at me surprised. They speak of the house, ma'am. The history. But he hesitated. They rarely stop to consider the woman behind it. Do they talk about the old account books? I persisted. The staff payrolls? He swallowed. Occasionally, mostly in terms of efficiency. My hands trembled as if someone had taken the measure of my pulse. The margins of my life had been trimmed away and placed into spreadsheets that didn't know the names of the people behind the numbers. A week in, I overheard a private call in the drawing room. She's out of the country, said a voice I recognized. Plenty of people know she's weak. She'll sign anything. Good, we'll proceed, the other voice replied. There's no rush, only the right moment. Weak. The word cut sharper than any accusation. I walked out into the garden, where the trimmed hedges cast tidy shadows. A gardener passed with a wheelbarrow, nodding at me as if I were one of the fixtures here. Everything okay, Clara? He asked. Yes, I said. Everything is fine. My answer was true in the way a practiced mask can be true. It covered the truth. That night I wrote steadily. Observed, Daniel, ambition untempered by humility. Amelia, image over substance. Sophie, torn. Noted, invoice irregularities. Delayed donations. Staff murmurs. I added a line I didn't read aloud, my exhaustion and a strange gratitude for the clarity that pain was giving me. When I folded the paper back into my apron, the house felt larger and more foreign than ever. The portraits watched without recognition. The rooms held echoes, not conversations. I had lived here for decades, and yet each corridor now seemed like someone else's memory. As I turned out the light in my small room, the voices from earlier that day circled in my head. Their jokes, their plans, their ease. I pressed my hand to the notebook and whispered to the empty ceiling, half prayer, half vow. Every cruel word they said made my disguise harder to bear, and my resolve stronger. The morning air inside the mansion was heavy with polish and silence. I was wiping the framed photographs on the hallway wall when I heard soft footsteps behind me. You always start here, don't you? I turned quickly. Sophie stood by the doorway holding a mug, her hair pulled into a loose bun. It's the dustiest spot, I said quietly. Better to tackle it first. She smiled faintly. You sound like my mother. She used to say the same thing. I froze for half a second, cloth in hand. She sounds wise, I managed. She was, Sophie said. Still is, I guess, just far away. The words pricked something deep inside me. I looked down at the frame I'd just polished. An old photo of the family at a lake house, sunlight splashing over faces that used to look happy. Sophie lingered beside me. She'd be furious if she saw the way things are now, Sophie whispered. Daniel's buried in numbers. Amelia only talks about investors. I'm just trying to keep peace. It's hard keeping peace when no one wants it, I said softly. You get it, she sighed. I feel like you actually listen. Her honesty disarmed me. I wasn't supposed to be seen. Maids weren't meant to matter. Yet here she was, offering me her heart in fragments. I try to listen, I said. Sometimes people just need that. Sophie hesitated. Would you like some tea? You've been working since dawn. That's kind of you, but please, she insisted. It's already made. She handed me the mug before I could protest. It was warm and fragrant, like how mornings used to be before I became Clara. I took a careful sip. Good? She asked. Perfect, I said. Just the right amount of sweetness. Mom always made it that way. My throat tightened. Then she must have been a thoughtful woman. She was, maybe too thoughtful. She cared about everyone else and forgot herself. I smiled faintly. Maybe that's love. Sophie looked at me with sudden intensity. Do you think love can survive distance? I steadied my hands around the mug. It depends what kind of distance, I said slowly. Sometimes miles are kinder than silence. She exhaled, leaning against the wall. I don't know. I keep writing to her, but she never replies. Maybe she's tired of us. My heart twisted. I doubt that, I said gently. Mothers don't stop loving. Sometimes they just wait until it's safe to come back. Her eyes softened. You talk like someone who knows. I forced a small laugh. Maybe I've just lived long enough to learn a few things. She looked as if she wanted to say more, but footsteps echoed down the hall. Amelia's sharp voice carried before she appeared. Sophie, why are you standing around? There's a meeting in 15 minutes. Amelia's eyes flicked to me. Is the maid your new therapist? No, Sophie snapped, color rising in her cheeks. We were talking. Talking? Amelia scoffed. That's adorable. Maybe she can dust the boardroom while you pour your heart out. Amelia, I said quietly, I'll be done in a moment. I'm sure you will, she said, her smile brittle. Make sure the silver's polished before lunch. I don't want guests seeing fingerprints. When she left, Sophie shook her head. She's unbearable lately. She's under pressure, I said carefully. People show stress in different ways. Yeah, well, hers is always cruelty, Sophie muttered. It's like she can't breathe unless someone else is beneath her. I said nothing. There was truth in her words, but also exhaustion. You shouldn't let her talk to you like that, Sophie added suddenly. It doesn't bother me, I said. It should. I smiled faintly. Kindness bothers cruel people more than anger ever could. She studied me for a moment, then whispered, You really remind me of her. The words sank like pebbles into still water. I wanted to tell her, I am her, but the secret had to stay buried a little longer. That night, after most of the staff had gone, I found Sophie in the kitchen with her laptop open, half-eaten toast beside her. She looked up startled. Oh, Clara, I didn't hear you come in. Couldn't sleep, I said. Thought I'd tidy before morning. You work too much. I've heard worse habits. She laughed softly. You'd fit right in with my mom's generation. Everything was discipline and loyalty back then. It's how things last, I said. She closed the laptop and pushed the toast toward me. Eat this. You skipped dinner. I hesitated. It's fine. No arguments. Please. Her tone reminded me of when she was little, insisting I eat her burnt cookies because she wanted to make me proud. I took the toast, biting carefully. You're thoughtful, I said. Your mother must have done something right. She did everything right, Sophie whispered. We didn't deserve her. Don't say that. But it's true, she insisted. Daniel wanted control, Amelia wanted status, and I just wanted her to stay. Now we've lost her. You haven't lost her, I said softly. Sometimes love hides where you least expect it. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the low light. If she came back, I'd apologize for everything. For letting them talk over her. For not standing up when she needed me. I swallowed the ache rising in my chest. Maybe she already knows that. Do you really think so? I do. She smiled through a tear. You're strange, Clara. You talk like someone who knows my mother's heart better than anyone. I just understand what it means to be one, I said. Do you have kids? I looked at the tiled floor. I did, once. They grew up faster than I expected. Did they treat you well? I hesitated. They loved me in their own way. That doesn't sound like a yes. It's complicated. She nodded. I get that. Family always is. For a moment, silence filled the room. Not empty, but alive with everything I couldn't say. I'm glad you're here, Sophie said finally. This house feels warmer when you're around. The kindness in her voice nearly broke me. I wanted to reach out, to hold her the way I used to when storms frightened her as a child. But I couldn't. I'm glad too, I whispered. You remind me why I stayed. Stayed? In this job, I corrected quickly. It's nice to see there's still goodness left in this place. She smiled, unaware of the truth beneath my words. Good night, Clara. Good night, dear. When she left, I stood alone in the kitchen, the echo of her kindness clinging to me like a fragile scent. I took out my notebook and wrote by the dim light of the fridge. Sophie, heart still open. Compassion intact, hope alive. Then I closed it carefully and whispered to the dark. Sophie's kindness reignited my hope, but also my fear of what truth might destroy. You promised the quarterly numbers would improve, Daniel snapped as he walked into the kitchen, voice sharp enough to cut through the morning steam. We're restructuring, Amelia replied, without looking up, fingering the edge of a menu like it was a prop. I've lined up a private buyer. It'll cover the gap, for now. That's not restructuring, that's gambling, Daniel said. We can't keep papering over shortfalls. We can if we have to, Amelia said. There are ways to smooth the books. She smiled as if she'd offered a clever recipe. Temporary shell accounts, delayed invoices, nothing illegal, just creative accounting. You don't get to call it creative when vendors aren't paid, a voice said from the doorway. The house manager stood there, face pale. Mrs. Carter called this morning. Payroll's late again. The caterer's on the line. We'll sort it, Daniel said, and the lie sounded brittle. You said that last month, the manager shot back. People are worried. Staff are talking. Staff talk, Amelia sniffed. Let them talk. They don't deal with investors. That's rich, I said, folding a tea towel, keeping the cadence small and careful. People need steady pay. Amelia glanced at me like a bright object she didn't expect to find. And who are you to lecture us? Someone who's been in other people's kitchens, I said. You never know how vital small things are. Daniel laughed, a short, humorless sound. The maid's moralizing. Lovely. You'd be surprised how much goes unnoticed, I replied. Like unpaid invoices. Don't be dramatic, Amelia said, but there was a seam of worry in her voice now. That afternoon, I moved through rooms with my apron pocket heavy with lists. The staff mentioned vendors late at night, the little names that should have meant loyalty and work. I listened to details, then slipped into the pantry and typed a short coded message into the phone Mr. Reed had given me. Reed, check payroll discrepancies. Confidential. He answered within the hour. You're certain? His voice said over the line, low and edged with concern. You saw paperwork? I saw transfers, I whispered, because I had to sound like Clara. Small reroutes. Some charities missed. I didn't want to be alarmist. You did right to tell me, he said. Keep going. Don't get noticed. I'll start an audit from my end. Be careful, I said, and then the line clicked. You all right? Sophie asked later, sliding a tray across the counter. I will be, I answered. Thank you. You look worn, she said. You should rest. Rest isn't part of the schedule, I said, folding napkins. There was a meeting in the study that night. I stacked silverware just outside the door and listened with a patience I hadn't felt in years. We can't let the Johnson acquisition fall through, Daniel said, voice tight. It's the centerpiece. If that goes, we're bleeding. You're talking like a man who needs adrenaline, Amelia said. Calm down. I have contacts who'll move things quickly. Move things how? A quieter voice asked. You mean without audit trails? We mean discreet, Amelia said. Use storage, temporary holdings. We're not stealing, just reallocating until liquidity returns. Temporary holdings at whose facility? Another voice asked. There was a pause. There's the old family crypt, someone muttered. No one checks it, not really. It's secure. My hand stilled on the polishing cloth. The old family crypt was a place of memory, not a warehouse. The room swayed for a heartbeat. I kept my breath small and steady and pretended not to hear, though every syllable burned. You're joking? Daniel said sharply. You can't be serious. It's practical, Amelia insisted. No paper trail if handled carefully. We move items through a third party, minimal contact. By the time people question it, we'll be settled elsewhere. You're talking about desecration, the manager said, voice low. It's not desecration if it saves the company, Amelia retorted. And if Reed is on board, there's a legal wrapper. I moved my chair an inch closer. The maid's invisibility wavered like a candle in draft. That's dangerous, I heard myself say, though the voice came out as Clara. Dangerous times call for bold measures, Daniel replied. We either salvage the acquisition or we lose everything. You're forgetting reputation, Sophie said, quiet and firm. Not everything is a balance sheet. Reputation is negotiable if the firm collapses, Amelia shot back. We do what we must. The word must landed like an order. I returned to polishing, hands steady, but my mind telescoped back to nights of signatures and ledgers, to the weight of promises that had been my life. Later, while arranging linens, Mr. Reed called again. I'm pulling statements from the last 6 months, he said. There are anomalies. You were right to flag this. What do you need from me? I asked. Just keep observing. Don't interfere. And keep notes of any names or places they mention. I will, I promised. Thank you. You're putting yourself at risk, he warned. I'm aware, I said. They think I'm invisible. That week, I started leaving small notes. Dates, mentions, copy of invoices tucked into the linings of towels. I wrote names on the inside cover of a cook's ledger, scribbled license plate numbers on the back of menus. Each tiny record was an evidence stitch I could drop into Reed's hands without exposing myself. "Why are you always in the pantry?" Amelia demanded one morning, eyes narrowed. "Because it's out of the way," I said. "And because people lose things there." "Like morals?" she said, amused. "You pick a poor place to make jokes," I answered. "There's dignity in work, not in your brand of cleverness." Her laughter had no warmth. "You really believe that, don't you?" she said. "People like us make decisions you could never imagine." "Maybe I could," I replied. "Once." Sophie's footsteps slowed behind her. "They talk about selling a few pieces in the collection," she murmured to herself, and the way she said it sounded like a question, not a plan. "Who?" I asked. "You know," she said reluctantly. "The pieces Dad used to lecture about. He'd be—" She stopped, unable to finish. "He'd be furious," I said softly. "He loved authenticity." "He did," she said. "He wanted things preserved, not traded." "You're right," I said. He wanted truth. The next day, a vendor arrived, looking for payment. He spoke to the manager, and then, when no answer came, wandered toward the staff room. I intercepted him with a tray. "You're here for the linens?" I asked. "No," he said. "I'm here for the grant we did together last quarter. We never received the funds." "I'll speak to Mr. Reed," I said, and the lie fell like gravel. "He handles the finances." "He said that last month," the man muttered. "When he says that, it means I should take a number and wait." I put my hand on his arm. "Tell me everything," I said. He unloaded a list of names and missed checks, the kind of small betrayals that grow teeth when they meet months. I tucked his card into my apron. That night, I bent over the little lamp in my room and copied the vendor's list into my notebook. Daniel and Amelia's faces swam like heat mirages as I wrote. The house hummed with the quiet of rooms that didn't know how to mourn. I stood at the window, looking out at the manicured hedges and the ancient stone of the family plot rising beyond them. The crypt they'd mentioned felt suddenly obscene in my mind. They thought I was invisible, but I was watching their empire crumble from within. I folded the notebook shut and whispered into the dark, "You will see what I see." "You broke it." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." "Look at that, Clara, you've ruined it." "I didn't mean to. I was only leaning the ladder." "It was an heirloom, not a ladder target." Her hand came up before I could steady it. The vase toppled in slow motion and shattered across the marble like a secret being exposed. "Oh my God," Sophie breathed, stepping back. Clara, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice small. "I'll clean it up." "You'll pay for that," Amelia snapped, eyes sharp as a ledger. "We don't have time for clumsiness." "You don't think I know that?" I asked, folding my hands as if a maid's posture could contain the tremor in my fingers. "I'll replace it." "Replace it?" Daniel laughed, bitter. "Do you know what that is?" "That's not a trinket. It's provenance." "I'll make it right," I said, and the lie landed heavy. "I'll talk to Mr. Reed." "You?" Amelia scoffed. "You don't have an account at Reed's firm. You're a cleaner." "You don't need to be cruel," Sophie said. Her voice was thin with something like shame. "It's not cruel," Amelia returned. "It's practical. Accidents happen. People are careless. We have standards." I crouched to sweep shards, keeping my face down. Hands moved around me. Daniel gathering fragments, the house manager frowning, Sophie handing me a dustpan with tremulous hands. Amelia's boots tapped the floor like verdicts. "You always loved that piece," Sophie whispered when the big hands had left the room. "Dad gave it to you the year you married." "It was nice," I said. The memory rose without permission, his laughter, the ribbon tied clumsily, the way light used to fall across the glass. Now it lay in pieces I could not fix with words. "Clara, is there anything else you need?" the house manager asked, careful and kind. "No," I said. "I'll manage." Later, I locked myself in the staff room and looked at the face the mirror returned. A woman in a plain cap, cheeks flushed, eyes rimmed with a tiredness that hadn't been there a month ago. Half of me hovered over the shards, same hands that had signed contracts and built a company. The other half bowed and wiped and pretended. "You okay?" Mr. Reed's voice came soft through the line when I called. "I got your message." "I'm fine," I said, but the truth tasted like metal. Amelia snapped. She hit you?" His question was more a calculation than surprise. "Not exactly." I exhaled. She slapped the air. Her hand, she meant to chastise, not strike. That will be on record, he said. Keep calm. Don't react. I'm arranging something. What are you arranging? I asked, needing to feel a plan. A dinner. A formal meeting. I'll have the board and some press present, controlled. You won't need to speak yet. Press? I hesitated. This isn't about spectacle. It is. His voice was steady. It's about truth. They think everything can be smoothed over. We'll show them they can't buy time. I closed my eyes and imagined their faces in the room. Daniel, chest puffed with spreadsheets. Amelia, careful with her smile. Sophie, trembling between two loyalties. I felt both dread and a fierce clarity. You think this will work? I asked. It will if you let it, he said. You must be precise. Gather what you can. Keep your notes. Never let them see you crumble. I'm good at pretending, I said, and heard how small that sounded. Good, he replied. I'll take care of the legal angle. You take care of evidence. When the line went dead, I practiced breathing like a patient preparing for surgery. I rehearsed sentences in the tight mirror light. I am Evelyn Hart. I am accusing. I am done with being ignored. That night, Amelia glided into the lounge with a drink and a smile designed for cameras. The piece broke, she announced conversationally. Clumsy staff. We're covering it, Daniel said, already dialing someone. Insurance can handle provenance claims. Sophie, were you overseeing the display? Amelia asked, the question a trap dressed as concern. No, Sophie said, face pale. I was in the studio. You must be more careful, Amelia tutted. We can't have accidents when we're courting donors. I know, Sophie whispered. I'm sorry. You should be, Amelia said, and the room shrank to the size of the vase. After they left, I crept back into the library. The ledger lay where I had seen it before, my handwriting like a ghost across the page. I opened to margins I had once annotated and found new entries in a hand that favored clipped notes. What are you doing here? Daniel demanded from the doorway. His voice was near, anger softened into disbelief. Just checking inventory, I said, the voice of Clara making itself thin and obedient. You shouldn't be touching company records, he said. I'm only reading the room, I replied. Not your books. Then stay out. He stepped closer, and for a moment I felt the old animal panic. Children leaning forward, fortunes at stake. You don't understand how fragile things are. Fragile? I echoed. You built this on promises and now you call it fragile? It's business, he said. Emotion doesn't help. Maybe emotion built it, I said. Maybe someone cared enough to make it last. His jaw tightened. You're emotional. Step away. I did. I stepped into the corridor and steadied myself by the portrait of my husband, a painting I had always thought stern until then. It looked kinder than the faces in the dining room. That night the house seemed full of small accusations, laughter that tucked itself into corners, slippers left carelessly on stairways, polite phrases with sharp edges. In the small hour, after I had made certain notes and hidden invoices inside a drawer only I could reach, I stood by the window and practiced the first lines of what I would say when the time came. I had to be measured, not vengeful. Accurate, not theatrical. Every detail would need weight. What if they don't believe you? I asked myself, whispering to the dark. They'll have to, I answered, the answer coming cold and steady. The following morning, Amelia came into the staff room to inspect the linens herself, as if to prove mastery over tiny things. We can't have surprises, she said, folding towels with a force that made them crisp. You'll find something unexpected every day if you look hard enough, I said. What do you mean? She turned, eyes narrowed. People leave traces, I said. Not all of them are obvious until someone reads the margins. She smiled like a light snapped on. You're being cryptic. I'm being observant, I corrected. Sometimes that matters more than being loud. She studied me. You keep saying you're observant, and yet you let things slide into messes. The accusation was gentle, more disappointed than cruel. Maybe I've learned to be patient, I said. Or maybe I know the cost when you don't notice. She threw her head back in a laugh that wasn't funny. You talk like someone who once managed things, she said. Do you envy the old life? Not envy, I said. I miss it sometimes. She rolled her eyes. Well, don't get sentimental. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. Maybe it keeps people from destroying what bills measure. She left angry and polished, leaving the room smelling faintly of expensive soap. That night, I sat with my notebook under the lamp and wrote the names I had heard, the accounts, the dates. Mr. Reed's messages buzzed like a distant engine, legal advice and patient certainty. I folded one photocopy into an envelope and tucked it under my mattress like a talisman. When I turned off the light, my hands shook, not with fear, but with purpose. I had been a mother, then a matriarch, then an invisible worker. Now, with paper and proof, I was preparing a reckoning. That night, I stopped being their maid and started being their judge. The dining room smelled of roast and old money. Crystal chimed as people settled, and my hands were steady when I set the third plate down. "You really did this well, Reed," Daniel said, taking his seat. Thoughtful touch. "It's appropriate," Mr. Reed replied, voice calm. "We wanted tonight to be formal. A moment to recognize the family." "Recognize what?" Amelia's laugh had a sharp edge. "Her birthday? We barely caught a note about it." "She's entitled to a toast," Mr. Lang, a board member, said, leaning forward. "Stability matters. Public face, private order." "She left us," Daniel muttered. She walked out. "She needed time," Sophie said, folding her napkin, eyes down. She was always tired. "You don't get to rewrite history," Amelia said. "We kept things afloat." "You kept the managers happy," Mr. Lang corrected. "That's different." "Clara, more water," Mr. Reed asked quietly. I moved with the practiced invisibility of someone who knows where everything belongs. "And the roast, carve at the end." "Right away." My voice was small, measured. I reached for the silver platter and set it with precision, listening while the conversation orbited around me. Investors, acquisition timelines, reputational risk. Their words made a lattice of greed that caught in my throat. "You look pale," Sophie said suddenly to no one in particular. "Is the lighting unpleasant tonight?" "It's fine," Amelia said. "We have guests. Let's keep it polished." "Polished," Daniel repeated like proof. "We can't afford softness." "Softness is what breaks people," Amelia said, brittle. "Not balance sheets." "You always pick sides, Amelia," Mr. Reed said. "Tonight is about acknowledgement." "Acknowledgement?" She scoffed. "Acknowledgement doesn't pay creditors." "Clara," Sophie whispered, "do you think she would have liked the roses?" "She would have fussed about the variety," I heard myself say, because being small allowed me to speak small truths. She'd ask why the garden roses when English ones were in season. Sophie's smile was a quick, sharp thing. She always knew the flowers better than anyone. "You know, your mother used to insist on picking bouquets by scent, not color," Mr. Lang added, indulgent. "Little eccentricities make rich people interesting." "She gave away a scholarship the year the market dipped," Daniel said, voice tight. "Generosity can be managed." "She gave away kindness like someone handing out coins," Amelia replied, eyes on me for a sliver of a second, then away. "It's sentimental." "Sentiment is fragile," Mr. Reed said, raising his glass. "To resilience." "To resilience," the table echoed, and I set the tray down as if my hands had not been holding the family name for decades. "Will there be a speech?" someone asked. "Yes," Mr. Reed said. "A short one. But first, Daniel, tell our guests about the Johnson acquisition." "You want me to now?" Daniel's chest puffed with a business posture that had replaced the boy I once smoothed hair for. "Yes, you've been preparing it all week." He smiled with the confidence of someone convinced of his own preparation. "I'll present the figures." "We're on track if the documents are approved," Daniel said. "No surprises." "No surprises," Amelia repeated, eyes sharp, then leaning in conspiratorially. "We're moving assets, nothing more. Temporary holdings, discreet partners. We keep reputation, we keep liquidity." "That's practical," Mr. Lang said approvingly. "Keep Clara?" Sophie's voice pulled me back. "Can you refill my glass?" "Of course." I poured and felt the conversation ripple like water. I had to place every glass perfectly to be seen and unseen at once. "You're awfully attentive tonight," Amelia observed. "You must like your job." "It's honest work," I said. "It keeps the house comfortable." "Comfort doesn't buy loyalty," Daniel snapped. "Loyalty buys comfort." "You talk as if loyalty is a commodity," Sophie whispered, and something like regret clouded her face. "It can be," Amelia said, cruelly casual, "if it's priced right." The first course ended and the plates were cleared. I stood behind a pillar and watched faces illuminated by candlelight, faces I had known when they were small and freckled, when worries were scraped knees, not board meetings. "Reed," Mr. Lang said, "you promised a surprise guest." "I did," Mr. Reed replied. I promised the family would hear from someone who understands both stewardship and scholarship. He rose and the room quieted like a held breath. We've invited a consultant, he began, voice formal. Someone who can speak to authenticity and value, not just market value, but provenance. He gestured toward the doorway. A murmur went around the table. A museum consultant? Someone guessed. Exactly. Mr. Reed smiled. Please welcome Evie. I stopped breathing. I had not known he would use my nickname. I had not known he would call me into the light by a name only family would use. My cap felt heavier, my borrowed coat suddenly a costume I could not wear. Evelyn Hart, Mr. Reed finished. Silence crashed. Cutlery paused midair. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. Amelia's smile faltered like a cracked mask. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. Evelyn? Daniel's voice was a hybrid of accusation and disbelief. You... Mr. Reed's hand was steady on my shoulder. She's agreed to consult for a short project. We thought it fitting she introduce herself to the board. Consult? Amelia's laugh was thin. You asked her to, why, for PR? She has expertise, Mr. Lang said, frowning. Her credentials are impeccable. Is this a joke? Daniel demanded. Where has she been? Sophie stood abruptly. Evelyn, are you? I stepped forward, hands steady now with a resolve that had been building in small, hidden rooms. The scarf came away. The cap left my head. I lowered the glasses. Hello, I said, and the name felt like a bell. It's me. Their faces shifted as if turned toward sunlight. Amelia's lips parted, then pressed closed. Daniel's face flushed with heat, shame, and something like fear. Sophie's hands trembled so visibly the tablecloth rustled. You're not, Daniel began. I am, I said, voice clear. I never left. I merely left the office and came back in a different dress to see what you had become. You can't be serious, Amelia whispered. This is melodrama. It's honesty, I replied. You called me absent. You called my absence weakness. I walked slowly, each step measured. So I left you to your choices. You did this to us, Daniel said, shouting now. You manipulated us. I watched, I corrected. I watched choices be made in my name. You can't, Amelia started, but Mr. Reed raised a hand. Allow her, he said. She requested time to speak. Sophie's voice was small. Mom, if that's really you, why? Why hide? Because I needed to know who loved me for me, I said. Not for a name, not for a bank balance, not for a portrait on the wall. You left us, Daniel said, the accusation raw. You left and now you return to judge. I didn't return to judge, I said. I returned to show you what I saw when I thought I'd lost you. Amelia's composure cracked. You humiliated us. I had to be seen and not be seen, I said. You treated me like a ledger. You appropriated my husband's legacy as if it were currency. You turned memory into merchandise. You don't get to lecture us about stewardship, Daniel spat. We keep the company running. You keep it afloat with the idea that money is the only measure, I replied. You sold off kindness for the price of expedience. Sophie stepped between us like a thin shield. Daniel, stop. This isn't helping. Her voice shook. Mom, please stop fighting us. I'm not here to fight, I said. I'm here to end the pretense. I have documents. I let the words hang. Invoices, transfers, delayed payments. Proof that the house has been a ledger rather than a home. You can't, Amelia began, panicked. We can, Mr. Reed said, and he opened a folder on the table and let the photocopies fall like sparrows. Heads bent, fingers fumbled, faces paled. Sophie's hand covered her mouth, eyes glassy. Daniel's jaw worked like a trap. Amelia's face drained of color. You used our funeral, our grief, for profit, I said, quiet now but louder than I'd ever been in a boardroom. You used the crypt as storage. You made lies into business models. You don't know what you're alleging, Daniel said, voice thin. I know every invoice, I said. I know the names of the vendors whose checks never cleared. I watched the margins you carved. I kept notes. I placed my notebook on the table and slid it toward Mr. Reed. The room smelled suddenly of cold things, linen, guilt, and a truth too heavy to be ignored. They stared at me like people who had discovered a portrait behind the wallpaper they'd painted over. For all their plans, their acquisitions, their public faces, they had missed the woman who had always been there. Their mother hadn't left them. She had been among them the whole time. You can't do this, Daniel said, voice raw and bright with anger that hadn't yet learned how to sound polite. I already have, I answered, and my voice didn't tremble. I transferred operational control to Mr. Reed. I'm making changes now. You can't just, Amelia began, then stopped as Mr. Reed laid a hand on a folder and smiled with calm industry. Please, he said. Let her speak. We arranged the meeting. Your theatrics, Daniel spat. This is a humiliation. Humiliation? Amelia echoed. You staged a spectacle, Reed. You brought theater into my home. It's not theater, Mr. Reed said. It's accountability. We have documents to review. Let's begin with facts. Sophie sat between the accusations like someone holding a fragile bowl. Her hands were small in her lap, and she kept rubbing them together as if to keep warm. Please, she said, voice broken. Just, can we not shout? You didn't stop it, Daniel shot back. You let her speak. You let this happen. She asked to speak, Mr. Reed said quietly. She requested an audit before she returned her attention to the company. You requested an audit as a stunt, Amelia insisted. This house is being paraded. It's necessary, I said, calm and steady. We've been careful, Mr. Reed. The papers are clear. I slid the notebook across the table where light caught the edges of my penciled notes. I kept records. I kept what I saw. You kept what you saw? Daniel's laugh was brittle. You were, what? Playing maid? You have no standing. My standing is this, I said. The company bears my name. The ledger bears my handwriting. I have every right to ask questions about its health. I looked at them one by one. I stood aside to see, and what I found was not stewardship. It was theft dressed as strategy. Accusations are light until you prove them, Amelia said. Where are your proofs? Mr. Reed opened the folder and began to set photocopies in front of the board. We've documented a series of transfers and delayed disbursements linked to shell accounts, he said. Vendor payments deferred, charitable donations rerouted, inventory off books. I've flagged irregular invoices and cross-referenced them with carrier manifests. These are not bookkeeping choices. They're concealment. Those are coincidences, Daniel said. Account codes change. We restructure all the time. This isn't restructuring, the house manager said, stepping forward with the steady modesty of someone who had watched wages missed and staff worry. This is people not paid. It's vendors calling every week. It's the caterer who nearly closed. People talk when their children don't get paid. His voice was small, but it landed like stone. You're making moral arguments out of numbers, Amelia snapped. Business is messy. It's not messy when people go hungry, Sophie said, and the sound of her voice unarmored shook the edges of the room. Enough, Mr. Reed said. The documentation is here. We'll let the numbers speak. He clicked a remote, and images filled the screen. Screenshots of transfers, dated emails, a canceled check marked defer to Q3. The letters on the documents were clinical, impossible to argue with. Eyes followed each line like people reading their own bank statements for the first time. You'll have your chance to explain, Mr. Reed told them. Explain? Daniel barked. Explain what? That we misallocated? That we found ways to bridge liquidity? That is business planning. Business planning doesn't close charities, I said. Business planning doesn't fill personal accounts with artifacts moved under the cover of cataloging. Business planning doesn't forget the people who kept this house. You're dramatizing, Amelia said, but her voice had narrowed. I saw her brain counting exits, contingencies, reputational damage, figures flickering behind a thin smile. Sophie began to cry softly, a single sound she tried to choke down and couldn't. Why would you do this? She asked, looking at Daniel and Amelia. Why would you risk everything for more? For growth, Daniel said, and the word sounded like currency in his mouth. For the company. For what it's become, I said. For a ledger that eats its own margins. You're sentimental, Amelia said. You confuse sentiment with morality. Maybe I do, I replied. Or maybe I remember that a company is not just digits. It's people and obligations and promises. Daniel rose as if to defend the air itself. You sold us out, he said. You placed words above the firm. You chose drama over counsel. I chose truth, I said, and I chose to protect what matters. Effective immediately, Daniel and Amelia, you are relieved of your positions. Sophie, you will retain a position, but under oversight and with clear performance parameters. The board will appoint an interim management team to review all transactions. Mr. Lang will act as independent chair during the transition. You can't, Amelia began, voice high. You're not in control. I am the owner, I said. Control is stewardship, not entitlement. I will not have the name I love turned into a ledger of lies. You're overstepping, Daniel shouted. This will ruin us. It will correct what's broken, Mr. Reed said. Legal measures will follow. We'll protect the company, and we'll protect the people affected by these decisions. Sophie's sobs became a small, desperate noise. Mom, please don't make them beg. I'm not making them beg, I said. The words were softer than I expected. I'm making them answer. Answer what? For a smear campaign? Amelia clutched at the table. You think this will heal anything? It isn't about healing for you, I replied. It's about honesty. You're sentencing us? Daniel demanded. You won't listen to our side? We will hear it, Mr. Reed said. There will be a thorough review, but the preliminary findings are severe enough to require immediate action to prevent further loss. You're destroying the family, Amelia whispered, her fingers white at the edges. I'm protecting the legacy, I said. A legacy isn't an asset class. It's integrity. Mom. Sophie reached out and touched my hand. Are you sure? This is so— Yes, I said, and the certainty surprised me. I am sure. Daniel looked at me like a man who had been counting on a cushion that suddenly wasn't there. You always said you'd never reduce us to names in a ledger. You said— He broke off, unable to finish the sentence that would have been an admission. You spoke about the company like it was an extension of Dad, he said finally, softer. You blamed us for forgetting, I answered. For choosing balance over people. You could have talked, Amelia said. You could have told us. You left and then returned to ambush. I left to see who you would be without me, I said. I needed evidence because conversations had become silences. I needed to know if you were children or custodians. Sophie's shoulders shook. We were confused, she said. We didn't know how to hold on to both, my work and her. She looked to me like a child pleading for permission to be forgiven. You're not children anymore, I said. You're adults who had responsibilities. When people speak in rooms you don't see, they make choices that affect others. A long, heavy silence settled like dust. The photocopies lay on the table like falling leaves. Outside, the mansion's hedges caught the late sun, and inside, the air tasted like cooling iron. Amelia, Daniel, Mr. Reed said, voice steady, businesslike. We'll begin the formal process. HR will notify you of the effective date. Legal counsel will reach out regarding any compliance matters. For now, we ask you to step down and allow an independent review. Amelia's eyes glittered with humiliation and fury. This is war, she hissed. Then let the facts be ammunition, I said. Sophie buried her face in her hands and began to cry more openly. I didn't want this, she whispered. I wanted her. You have her, I said, and I meant it. You have me here and now you'll have the chance to earn trust, not assume it. Her shoulders lifted slightly, as if hope breathed back into her. Daniel's mouth tightened until I thought he might crack. Amelia looked like a ship caught on a reef. Mr. Reed gathered the documents, placing each copy into a folder with the calm of someone setting a course. We will move carefully, he promised. Justice isn't revenge. It's restoration. Restoration, I repeated, tasting the word. That's what this has to be. They left the room in a disordered procession. Angry words thrown back and forth, slammed doors, a chair scraped. Sophie lingered, eyes wet and raw. I'm sorry, she whispered, as if apologizing could smooth the edges. I know, I said. And I forgive the part of you that hesitated. Forgiveness isn't easy when the hurt is large. She nodded, and then the house swallowed her as she walked away. When the doorway closed, I felt the silence wrap around me. It was not the silence of peace. It was a heavy pause waiting to be measured, a room holding its breath. The verdict had been spoken. The machinery of law and money would follow. But the quiet afterwards, thick, echoing, settled deeper than any penalty. I sank into a chair and closed my eyes, feeling the tremor in my chest like a bell tolling. The silence after my verdict was heavier than any punishment I could imagine. You aren't answering my calls. I can't talk right now. You hung up on me. I didn't think we needed to argue. You think you're above this? I don't think I'm above anything. I made a decision. His voice was sharp until it softened into something brittle. You made a decision that ruined us. I saved the company, I said, and the words sat like a stone between us. I saved the people who work there. You ruined our lives, he said, quieter now, and then the line went dead. I set the phone down as if it might break and breathed. The room smelled faintly of lemon and paper. The house felt too large for the small sounds I made. Outside, a car engine idled, then drove away. A door closed somewhere like a punctuation mark. He cut me off, Sophie said, sitting opposite me with a mug in both hands. He blocked my number this morning. He's angry, I said. He's allowed to be. He didn't even say goodbye, she whispered. He just disappeared. People flee what they can't control, I said. Anger buys time. She wrapped her fingers around the mug tighter. Amelia hasn't been seen in public. A friend told me she's staying. Somewhere private. She's not answering the press when they call. That's expected, I said. Humiliation hides in hotels more than it hides in honest conversation. She posted something, though, she blurted. About privacy and family pain, then deleted it. Her laugh was small and broken. She always knew how to perform grief. I didn't want this spectacle, I confessed. But hiding the truth would have been a longer cruelty. You made the choice, she said, looking at me with something like accusation softened into wonder. You chose proof over a conversation. Conversations were only comfort when the ledger agreed, I said. When the ledger wanted silence, silence came. I needed truth to be louder than the excuses. He rapped on the table, Mr. Reed's punctual knock, the kind that asks permission as well as announces arrival. Update, he said, taking the chair by the window. Legal's filed the preliminary measures. HR is contacting staff. We've frozen suspect transfers pending audit. You did what needed to be done, I answered, trying to sound steady. Will the company survive this? It will, he said. Rebuilding is harder than fixing an account, but it's possible. You acted prudently. You say that kindly, Sophie observed. You always make it sound reasonable. I've always believed stewardship means acting before loss becomes irreversible, he said. You acted with evidence. That matters. I acted with a broken heart, I said. The words were private and felt strangely right on my tongue. It's a poor compass, but sometimes it points truer than numbers. Sophie reached across and took my hand. I don't know if I deserve you, she said, words barely audible. You don't earn a mother like a coupon, I replied. Love isn't transactional, Sophie. She smiled through tears. Then why did I feel like I should earn it? Because we confuse proximity with affection, I said. We think being near someone equals caring. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it hides neglect. A silence settled between us. The kind that carries memory. The sound of piano lessons. The smell of lemon cake on a birthday. The dull ache of distance disguised as composure. I watched her face, small hands like a child's, and felt that old, fierce protectiveness flare up and then settle into something quieter. Do you regret it? She asked suddenly. The question was simple and dangerous. Regret is a heavy coin, I answered. I regret the years we wasted on assumed loyalties. I regret not knowing how to be closer sooner. But I don't regret this moment. The truth had to be found. You cost them everything, she murmured. I cost them their illusion, I said. There's a difference. They'll hate you, she said. They already do. If hate helps them wake up, let it be, I said. If it destroys them, then that's a consequence they chose. Her eyes dropped. Isn't there a cost to you? To us? There is, I admitted. When Daniel left, part of me wanted to call him, beg him. But I didn't. I needed to hold the line. I had to be more than a wound in their story. You think they'll come back? She asked, hopeful in spite of everything. People return for different reasons, I said. Some for guilt, some for money, some for their own comfort. I'd rather they come back to rebuild than to keep taking. Mr. Reed leaned forward. We'll protect the staff and vendors first. That's our legal duty. Then we'll repair reputation. That part will take time and careful speech. You make it sound so neat, Sophie said wryly. Neat speeches don't fix the nights people go hungry. They will now have payroll, he said. That's an immediate fix. The rest, transparency, restructuring, will slow the rot. A faint laugh escaped me, half disbelief, half relief. You make me sound like a hero, I said. You aren't a hero, she said quickly. You're a stubborn woman who refused to be ignored. I suppose stubbornness has its uses, I replied. She watched me then, searching my face like someone reading a map. Will you be okay? she asked. I will be, I said. But okay will look different now. Quiet mornings without the pretense of a smiling luncheon, nights with fewer polite calls. Those things feel like losses. You can have a quieter life, she said. We can try to rebuild together. A warmth spread through me at the pronoun. Together is a small word, I said, but it's the one I want. Do you forgive them? She asked softly. Forgiveness isn't a flip, I said. It's a process. I'm beginning it. Maybe forgiveness is saying, we'll fix what we can, and truth will have its place. I paused. I forgive the child who wanted comfort. I don't forgive exploitation. That sounds fair, she said. We talked until the light outside thinned. Words folding over practical things. Vendors to call, accounts to confirm, small acts of repair that looked more like stationery and less like catharsis. Mr. Reed's presence steadied us. His voice a ledger as much emotional as financial. When she rose to leave, she hesitated by the doorway. Can I stay here tonight? She asked, eyes vulnerable in a way that erased any remaining performance. Yes, I said, meaning it. Stay. This house should remember what warmth feels like. She stepped closer and hugged me, brief, urgent, as if trying to stitch something with pressure. Her head fit against my shoulder like a piece returning to a puzzle. You said once, she whispered, that love is not about what you inherit. It isn't, I said. It's what you choose to give. She pulled back and looked at me with something like steadiness. I loved you before I knew, she said. The sentence landed like a blessing I hadn't expected. I held the words for a moment, letting them settle into the hollows I'd been carrying. Justice had a cost, but love, even wounded, was worth more. The morning sun spilled through the tall windows, softer now, gentler somehow. You changed the drapes again, Sophie said, laughing as she balanced a tray of tea. They're brighter. You never liked bright. I used to think calm meant quiet colors, I said. Now I think calm just means peace. She smiled, setting the tray down. It feels different here. Warm, almost human. It used to feel like a museum, I replied. A museum of everything we thought proved we were doing well. It's not that anymore, she said. It's home. Her words lingered. The mansion wasn't echoing with deals or footsteps of staff afraid to speak. It carried softer sounds now. Laughter, distant piano keys, the rhythm of a house remembering it could breathe. Did you hear about Daniel? Sophie asked carefully. Yes, I said. Mr. Reed told me he's seeing someone for therapy. He's paying back vendors out of his own savings. She nodded. He's trying, Mom. I know, I said. That's all I ever wanted. Not perfection, just effort. And Amelia? Volunteering at the shelter, I said. Quietly, of course. She doesn't want anyone to think it's redemption. Sophie grinned faintly. It's very her, doing good but refusing to be seen doing it. Some people need privacy to become better, I said. Shame makes them afraid of eyes. You don't hate them anymore, do you? She asked softly. I looked out the window at the garden. Roses back in bloom, wild edges trimmed but alive. No, I never hated them. I was just disappointed. She reached for my hand. You gave them a chance to start over. That's not disappointment. That's grace. Maybe, I said. But grace isn't easy. It's heavy. It asks you to carry what broke you and still choose not to drop it. She laughed quietly. You've turned poetic again. I've had practice, I said, smiling. She rose and crossed to the mantel where a new plaque rested. The Clara Foundation, she read aloud. Supporting domestic workers, improving wages, and protecting dignity. It felt right, I said. She, Clara, was the version of me who saw life from the floor instead of the boardroom. She taught me what respect really looks like. You're honoring her, Sophie said. And everyone like her. I'm honoring the lesson, I replied. That power means nothing if it only serves itself. She touched the plaque gently. Do you ever miss being her? Clara? I smiled. Sometimes. She was invisible but free. She listened more than she spoke. She saw what I'd stopped seeing. And now? Now, I said, I try to live as both of them, Evelyn who builds and Clara who feels. Mr. Reed's voice carried from the hall. You'll want to see this, he said, stepping in with a small envelope. The board approved your foundation grant. I raised an eyebrow. So soon? Your story helped, he said with a knowing smile. People trust sincerity more than they trust strategy. Imagine that, Sophie teased. Heart wins over money. It's rare, Mr. Reed said, but when it happens, it lasts. Thank you, I said sincerely, for standing by me when I wasn't sure who I was. You didn't lose yourself, he said. You just hid her for a while. After he left, I turned to Sophie. He's wrong, you know. I didn't just hide her. I had to lose everything, including my name, to remember who I really was. She stepped beside me at the window, sunlight catching in her hair. And who is that now? Someone who finally knows the value of her own worth, I said. Someone who understands love isn't proven by inheritance or applause. It's proven by choice. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You sound happy. I am, I said. Not perfectly, not constantly, but quietly happy. That's enough. We stood there in silence, watching the gardeners laughing as they carried new pots of flowers across the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, the old clock struck noon, steady and calm. I was wrong before, I whispered. I thought legacy meant what you leave behind. What does it mean now? Sophie asked. It means what you live every day, I said, and who you become when no one's watching. Outside, a breeze moved through the trees, carrying petals across the garden like tiny white flags of peace. I smiled, feeling the weight of years lift from my chest. The mansion no longer felt haunted, it felt alive. Sometimes you have to lose everything, including your name, to remember who you really are. If you've ever had to hide your true self just to see who would still stand beside you, tell me your story. Maybe you've worn a mask to survive or kept quiet just to feel seen. Share your truth in the comments below, because sometimes the only way to find real love is to lose the version of yourself that everyone else wanted you to be. And if stories like this remind you of your own strength, subscribe. You never know whose heart your story might heal next.